Hello, Internet.
So, I made the Scully mask without recording it because it's a very basic skull mask. I don't feel like anyone particularly needs a tutorial on how to make a skull mask. It's not difficult. In fact, I added extra detail by adding the shading on the sides because I wanted to. Also, he does have a skeleton nose on the bottom, because that's kind of how it's vaguely shown. So, I didn't film me making this because, again, really basic, similar to why I didn't film me making Masky's mask. It's just a very basic blank face on a white mask. However, a lot of people seem to forget that Seth also had a mask. I don't recall if he was ever given a name while in the mask, like Jay became Scully and Tim became Masky and Brian became Hoodie. I don't remember if Seth was ever given a name for when he switched over. I always personally call him Static. And I made this little mini version of his mask for the plushie that I made for him, because I'm a perfectly sane and reasonable person who just realized that the lighting in here is bad. Hold on. There we go. Works with the spooky mask on. Works less when I'm trying to show you things. So, you'll notice on this there is a little bit of extra shimmer that I put on the eyes and in this bit, because at least in the thing it looked like there was a little bit. So I used a gunmetal kind of thing for it. I'm going to see if I can replicate that using what I have without having to go out and get new paint. If I cannot manage to replicate it using what I have without having to go out and get new paint, then you will see me later. Then you will see a slightly different finished product at the end after I've fixed it. So I usually call it Static. This is the outline that I've done on the full-size mask. I'm essentially copying the one that I already made because finding decent pictures of the mask is nearly impossible, because most people forget that Seth even existed in Marble Hornets, let alone that he had a mask and actually had a slightly different role. So, finding decent pictures of the mask is nearly impossible. And I was dumb and I did not save the original reference image that I found for that one. So I'm just going to use the version that I made as the reference. It's usually not the best idea to use something that you made previously as a reference for a new thing, but it was that or spend hours trying to find a reference for a mask, and I'm like, I don't particularly feel like doing that. So the first thing we're going to do is make this gray, and it's actually kind of a light-ish gray. I'm using the Dixie cup because I don't particularly feel like using a paint palette when I'm only going to be mixing one color of paint. So I'm going to add a little bit of black first, mix it, and then see how that goes. Never mix paint with a dry brush. That's how you ruin your brush. But also never mix paint with a dripping brush, because again, that's how you water down the paint. Just a general thing. That might be too light, because paint tends to dry lighter than it is in the thing. So I think that's probably too light. We're going to add a little bit more black. I know technically you're probably not really supposed to mix paint with a paintbrush at all. I think you're supposed to use like a craft stick or something. But given that the move here has been reset and the budget has been tight, I haven't gotten a chance to resupply a lot of my craft things due to the just having moved thing. So we're gonna go with what we have, which is why I'm trying to do this the way that I am. Alright, you don't need to spend a while watching me paint this color. This is the color I ended up with. It looks pretty close to the correct thing. Strangely, the only one with like a really dark mask is Hoodie, so that's a little odd. But anywho, you will now watch me fast forward through painting this, because that's how this works. Be back. So, this is dry enough that I can continue. Like I said, patience is not a virtue that I have a lot of in spades. So, I'm going to be doing the tier marks next. And these are going to be done in Sharpie. Tori, why are you doing them in Sharpie and not in paint or in paint pen or in, alcohol marker? Because I have a ridiculous amount of Sharpies. I did them in Sharpie on this, which means I know I already have the colors. Sharpie also tends to dry quicker, which means that I should be able to, by the time I have this done, I won't be like smudging my hand in ink as I'm going down it. And since there is no blending required, it would be kind of silly to use alcohol markers. More than that, alcohol markers tend to strangely make me more lightheaded than Sharpies. And that's weird, because alcohol by itself, like rubbing alcohol by itself, doesn't make me lightheaded. Wearing alcohol paint doesn't make me lightheaded or make me break out, which sometimes alcohol markers do. It doesn't happen every time I use alcohol markers, but if I use alcohol markers for too long, I get like a rash on the side of my hand and on my arm a little bit. I don't have an explanation for that, because I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be made out of rubbing alcohol, and rubbing alcohol doesn't do that to me, so I think it has something to do with the kind of ink used. So I tried to not use alcohol markers as much as most artists do that use traditional mediums. I do have them. I don't particularly enjoy using them for the reasons I discussed. Why am I not using paint markers? Because paint markers are expensive, and I only have the only paint markers I have is a set of pastel ones. And none of these colors, well, I guess technically some of these colors are correct, but it seems kind of redundant to use paint markers for some of them and then have to use Sharpies for the other ones when I have all of the colors I need in Sharpie. So, that's going to be fun. Anyway, I'm going to begin the coloring process. I'm going to see if I can get this to record well. It probably won't, but I am going to try. Time to doing the fast forwarding thing. Yes, I'm aware that this is not center. I don't particularly care because these were supposed to be made by the characters themselves. So, canonically anyways, so, like, canonically speaking, it would make sense that there would be some amount of imperfection. That's also why I don't care about visible brush strokes and all of that fun-ish. It's also why I very specifically used, like, cheap paint, and also one of the other reasons I'm using Sharpie. Because I'm like, they aren't going to pay for alcohol markers or paint pens, because those are expensive. They're going to go down the Sharpie aisle and probably just steal them, if we're being honest. So I don't particularly care about any imperfections as long as I have, like, the big majority of the things there. I might, after doing one eye, pause and come back. That's going to depend on if the rest of these eyes are dry. And again, I will explain that when I get there. Alright. See you when we get back after this fast-forwarding montage-y thing. That is one side. I only actually had problems with 2 markers, and this one, it was such a small location that it needed to be in that I didn't bother getting a new one out. So, not too bad. If you're wondering why I went over the entirety of this one with a bad marker first, it's because it helps with the blending when you go over it with the new one. These are dry, which means we're going to get that part of it started. And by started, I mean I need to get it coated in a nice thin layer of glue. Before I do that, I'm gonna... Yeah. Before I do that, I want to get the first color under this eye so that I don't have to worry about it getting the messed up when I go over it. Because since this one has to be so close to the eye, I don't want to be sticking my hand in the glue as it's drying slightly. Because I can avoid putting my hand in the black for basically every color except that one. So we're going to go ahead and put that in now. Move these ones over. This one actually gets less colors because this one is bigger chunks or bigger blocks of the color, which is strange to me, but hey, I was not in charge of the creative decision in Seth's brain. Anywho, So, Tori, you may be wondering, what exactly are you going to be doing? Why are you putting glue on this? Well, I need the glue to get tacky but not completely dry, which is why I'm doing it now. And I'm going to be spreading it out thinly after I get nice globs in to work with. But I need to get it nice and thinly over, and this is also why I didn't add his eyebrows in right away, because they would have just ended up getting slightly covered. But we're going to try a technique that I've used on a couple different things. However, ironically, I've never used it on like something that was made out of paper. Every time I've used it, it's been on a plastic. So we're going to see how well this technique works on paper. And again, if this doesn't end up working and it ends up looking like the garbage, then the final photos that you see at the end will be slightly different. Or alternatively, depending on how long it takes for me to get a replacement, there will be a short about the update if this doesn't work for whatever reason. And I can't see why it wouldn't, but you know, the world is weird, and sometimes things hate me. So, do not drip into the eye. But I need for this to get, well, tacky. It's tacky glue. I need for it to get tacky. That's not why it's called tacky glue, obviously, but I need for it to get almost dry, but not quite. And because I have extra, I'm going to go ahead and go over this too. Yes. Now the key is to make sure you have quite a thin layer, so that way it dries quicker, especially since you're not trying to make it adhesive to anything. I was dumb and I didn't bring any water back in here to clean that off. Oh well. Tacky glue is usually pretty washable, and I did very specifically use a kind of garbage paintbrush for the glue anyway, just in case. But tacky glue is kind of known for being quite washable, so I'm not massively worried about the fact that I forgot to grab water. You know, did I just almost throw the glue away? I am very head empty today. Anyway. And now we shall fast forward again while I do the rest of this eye. And I will check back in with you to see if the tacky glue is in fact tacky. We shall see. Alright, it seems like we're good to go on this. Some of it dried quicker than I would like, but we should be good. Regardless. Now this will obviously need me to clear coat it afterwards. But in order to get that gunmetal look that I have on this, that I use nail polish for, because obviously this would be a hell of a lot of nail polish, I'm going to use some of this nice dark eyeshadow. A nice fluffy brush. And this is also why I used tacky glue, because tacky glue does not actually ever ruin my makeup brushes anytime I've used it on stuff. And we're just gonna buff this on. And it's gonna be weird feeling. It always is, because the glue does not dry in a nice layer. But it will only stick to the glue. Which means that even if you go outside of the area that you wanted, it's only going to stick to the glue. Appears this side was not quite as dry as the other side, annoyingly. Maybe the other side got a slightly thinner layer. Who knows? Regardless, this will give me that nice metallic look. And you can see the difference already. How much shinier one side is than the other. Now this isn't going to give me the dual chrome look that the other one has, but that would require a completely different pigment, and I don't have an eyeshadow like that. That's not a liquid, so. And it's going to look like you're screwing up your makeup brush, but as long as you use a washable glue like tacky glue, you're fine. You just have to use water that's hotter than you might normally use to wash your makeup brush. Which honestly, given how much cheaper doing this is than covering it in pigment, because if you were to go out and buy a dual chrome pigment or something, you are going to make a mess of whatever work area you're using. But that's why I used this, because this is a washable matte. But it looks like this worked quite well, which I am glad for. Because now both of my eyes are nice and sparkly, which is what I was going for. And if you have a dual chrome one, obviously go ahead and use that. If you have a color shifty eyeshadow that's not a liquid, go ahead and use that, or a color shifty highlighter. The key though is that you have to, I don't think a highlighter would work because it has to be dark. That's why I used the black instead of the silver, because it has to be dark. But as long as you wash this pretty immediately afterwards and you use really hot water, the glue will have no problem coming out of it. I mean, unless you're using a ridiculously cheap makeup brush, in which case you probably bought it explicitly for this purpose and are not worried about washing and reusing it anyways. Being honest. So, the last thing that I need to do, other than add eyebrows, which I don't think I'm going to bother filming, because that would be silly. That would be a silly thing to film. Because the eyebrows need to go on after this is dry and after I make sure I have all of the extra, because you are going to have fallout, as you can see. So the last things that I need to do, other than eyebrows, do the shading around it, and do the shading around it, and do some trimming, is go around these with this darker gray. And the reason that I do this, and I don't think this is in the main one, but the reason that I do this is because it cleans up the edges a little bit. Or I guess rather makes them intentionally dirty. So, also, while I'm doing this, I may as well explain the way that you get the shading around the outside is with spray paint. And you just hold it at quite a distance away. Sometimes I'll even have somebody else hold it. And you spray it right around the edges, and you just have to make sure you're at a really big distance away, so that you get shading and not like sharp lines. And then obviously if you want to, you can get a little bit closer with it to add darker shading or whatever. But generally speaking, you're just going around the edge. I would fast forward through this bit, but like I'm literally already done with one eye, so why would I bother? Yeah. The good news is, because the glue is already almost dry when you apply it, when you apply the glitter or powder or whatever it is you're using, because you can use regular pigment powder for that too. Like if you have mica powder or whatever, you can. I usually just use eyeshadow because eyeshadow does essentially the same thing and is cheaper and also has a use outside of just being a craft thing. So, like, it makes sense to me to just use something I already have instead of going out to buy something new. But, like, if you're a guy doing this, you probably don't have ready access to eyeshadow. Or if you do, you'd have to ask your girlfriend. And you had better hope you have a goth girlfriend. But anyway. Also, because I already had this paint prepared, because this is literally just the paint that I used for the mask already, and I just darkened it slightly by using the eye paint, actually. So, by putting it in there, I also prevent the glue that's on it from drying, which means it should wash off easier, theoretically. Again, I don't particularly care about that paintbrush if it doesn't dry, so if it doesn't come clean, I'm just like, oh no, I'm out a like 10-cent paintbrush. Oh no. Anyway. So, we're going to leave it at this because this is the main bulk of the work. You can see just how much more reflective the eyes are now. You can actually see better on the dot because there was a spot where the glue came up. So you could see where the stuff is versus where it's not. And that was really the look that I was going for. Which means that we're going to actually stick with this because I'm not too worried about getting the dual chrome look on this. Because you can only barely see it on the little mini one anyway. You have to like have the light hit it just right. And I'm like, I don't think I care that much, honestly. And even if I did, I would probably only go around the edges with it. So like, that's all. Peace and toodaloo and whatnot.